Okay, update on precious metals here. So gold, silver. And I think we actually have a sign that we may, like, while gold is underperforming now, perhaps it is ready to wake up. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But we'll start with gold itself. We'll look at the daily chart. And you can see here, we made this high. We had this pretty nice run for 27 days. Then we have this swing high. We collapsed down into this what looked like a daily cycle low here, but then we had an undercut low. That would be day 42. I mean, even right now, we look like we want to make a new low below, these two candles here. So even this might not be a DCL. I mean, we had a DCL, on day 55 a couple cycles ago. So who knows? We may actually still have some more downside. And the weekly chart does not look bullish. I've seen a few people tweet that the weekly chart looks bullish. I guess it depends on how, if you're like not paying attention to the details. But this level right here is a swing high, right? 1958. That swing high on the daily caused the swing high on the weekly, which we are still underneath right now, right? And so this is not a bullish looking chart. This is a chart that suggests we're in the declining phase of a weekly cycle. But there are other sort of bullish hints. So this is a very sort of tricky period. And I'll jump over, and you can see the monthly chart just started, which is also the quarterly chart, since it's April, new quarter. It's just one day of action so far. But we really do need to watch for a new monthly low, right? So we want to stay above, at this point, 1890 thereabouts. So that's going to be an important level to watch. But right now, this looks like maybe the DCL isn't even in yet, or if it is, this is a very sluggish cycle. Either way, it does not look very bullish. And I would say silver, very quickly, looks very similar. Very similar look. We had a pretty nice run. In case of silver, it was 23 days. But now we're just kind of consolidating down here in this sort of bear flag looking thing. And for silver, zooming in on the weekly chart, we are in week 9, so next week will be week 10, and you can see we have the swing high from week 6 that we're still, well below. For silver, that level is 25.30, right? So that's an important level. We did cross above it this week, but we've clearly closed below it on the weekly. So those are the two metals themselves. What is actually showing incredible bullishness are the miners, and I mean specifically the gold miners. The silver miners aren't looking all that great. But starting on the daily chart, I mean, remember that gold chart that was bear flagging? Well, this, on the other hand, is more of a bull flag, right? So we had a run of 26 days, so similar to that run that gold had, right? You notice these are all very similar. Gold had a run of 27, silver had a run of 23. So the gold miners had a run of 26 days. And then we dropped into a DCL. But notice, this is a nice, clean DCL, unlike gold's choppy mess that we're still kind of trying to churn around in. And I mentioned this in the previous video. So we had our swing high below this level here, same exact principle, below 37.89. We came down, we tried to bounce up. We had a final flush down, right? So this is your low, that's your lower high, that's your lower low. Then we crossed above, we came up, made a higher low, another higher high, higher low, higher high. Then we kind of undercut this, but now look at where we are. We're well above the swing low. Nice, beautiful, big, bullish outside candle. This is an important concept. Look, we started the day below the low of yesterday. And then we just like a rocket ship. This is a bullish outside candle, right? So like this entire candle is inside the range of this one. And in this case, it's green. We're going higher. So it's a bullish outside candle as opposed to a bearish outside candle. So the miners are really strong. And the miners tend to be where a lot of the money dumps into. And you can see Newmont is what's causing that strength. It's one of the biggest weights in GDX. It might be the biggest. Trying to close in on all-time highs here. The other thing that is really telling, almost more telling than the miners chart itself, is the ratio chart of the GDX to GLD, essentially gold miners to gold. And I know people have their there are things against GLD, but think of this as just a, sort of general idea. So daily chart, again, similar kind of action here, except we've barely pulled back. Remember, the miners had a pretty clear pullback. This has been a pretty straight upward trajectory, and you can see today, big green bar, and that's because gold had a down day, but you could see again, miners had a bullish outside day. Started down, but closed really strong. And you can see if we were to put a cycle analysis on the ratio itself, we would be in week 9, but pretty stretched above the 10-day moving average. So wouldn't be surprised to get a pullback soon. But notice the last 5 weekly cycles topped on week 9, 7, 11, and the previous one just before this one on week 7. We're already above the high from that cycle. And now we're about to try to test the high from the cycle before that one. Notice, because we've been in the downtrend, we've been making lower highs, right? So we had this high, and then we had this low, which is lower than this high. Or excuse me, we had this high, which is lower than this high, another lower high, another lower high. This is a higher high, higher than this. And so at some point, this is going to pull back. I mean, this is just so vertical. We're going to see a pullback. And because it's a ratio, that can mean any number of things. It could mean GDX and GLD going down at the same time, but GDX more than GLD, which is probably what ends up happening. But it looks like we're going to test this level. It's unclear if we are going to test this level before the weekly cycle decline begins. Again, we could easily see the weekly cycle go to week 11, like in this previous cycle, which wasn't bullish. Whereas this looks like it's setting up to be right translated and potentially, deliver a lot of upside. So the miners really do seem to be giving you a cue that, maybe gold is about to wake up. And you can see the monthly chart, incredibly bullish, 3 beautiful green bars, one high on the monthly chart, another high on the monthly chart. And if you look at the annual chart, so we'll zoom in here, this, just think about the big picture. And this isn't a ton of years because this is looking specifically at those ETFs, but you can see we've been in a gnarly downtrend. And now we've consolidated. You could argue this looks like a bear flag, right? Think about this fractal, right? These are, again, to be clear, each of these candles is 1 year of price action. So you could see this is like a bear flag, right? But we are about to make a new high on the annual chart, right? Once we go above the high from last year. So again, this is a ratio chart, so that could happen many different ways. But the point here is that this chart does better as miners do better, and miners doing well is a very, very bullish sign for precious metals. That's where a lot of money goes into the space. And so we're actually setting up, this is setting up for a bullish outside year, right? So we did poke down below. And so let's switch over to the GDX chart. You can kind of see similar concept. So the miners themselves, just no ratio. Notice the miners haven't been on as vicious a downtrend as the ratio itself, but similar pattern on the yearly chart. So it's not going to be quite an outside year, right? So we almost made a new low, almost just kind of kissed it. Now, I mean, it looks like I'd be shocked if we didn't make a new high above last year, which takes us above 40.13. But it'll be a question of, can it be sustained? You always have the fears of a false breakout, but this looks incredibly bullish. I mean, if anything, we bottomed, looks like, yeah, right. So really in 2016, this COVID year was a crazy sort of spike lower. And now it looks like we're ready to make new highs. The next move would be to take us above the 2020 high. And then you could easily see us, make a move closer to the 50. And then once we're there, the move to 60, closer to 70, seems like it would be actually pretty fast. So this is really, really exciting, but we have to be careful. So looking at the weekly chart, we always have to make sure that we're managing risk. The miners themselves are on week 9 this week. Next week will be week 10. The high so far has been on week 6. And so we're going to have to see if we can take out that high at, 40.26. And that would give us, a new high on the weekly chart. You can see very similar to that ratio chart. The last few cycles have topped out, essentially right around like either before week 10 or right after it. So the longest was week 11. And so you could easily see us, that really bullish cycle coming out of the COVID crash didn't top out till week 21. Even if we got a top on, let's say, week 15, that would take us to, you know, that's potentially the like early May before we get like the start of the weekly cycle decline. So a lot of sort of cross currents, but there's definitely a lot of reasons to be bullish as well. So like I'm really going to be watching this miners chart and that ratio chart as well because it suggests at some point gold is going to wake up. But thinking about the miners really tactically, we're on day 13 of a excuse me of this current daily cycle, and given how bullish things have been, we would expect this daily cycle to be right translated. Excuse me, and you can see even in cycles that haven't been so great, we've had the high on day 34, day 24. So we could easily see a high, into day 20, day 25. And so if we think about that, that might see us like, let's say we have a high on day 25. That would be, the sort of late April. So it'll be interesting to see how that coincides with the weekly cycle high, right? It does seem like, I guess it's possible that, the daily cycle high for this cycle will also be our weekly cycle high. So maybe it's actually more like, we get a daily cycle high around day like 34, right? And so we then get a decline for like a couple weeks into May for 3 or 4 weeks, let's say, through the end of May. Could be interesting. I'd say the miners are the thing to watch right now, and they could potentially be signaling gold about to wake up, and potentially, I would imagine, silver as a close follow.